Teal dear, how do we fix the gender earnings gap? The answer? With blatant sexism, according to UK company Brainlabs. Let us consider their case a little further, shall we?
All around the world, women are still getting paid less than men.
I got paid what?
Actually, you're talking about women earning less, not being paid less. These two things are different, and we'll cover this later.
Well, it's actually quite simple, I think. We introduce a pay gap tax. The pay gap tax is a tax that's paid to all the women in your company.
Woohoo!
By looking at the average amount that a man gets paid and the average amount that the woman gets paid, and that difference is paid to all the women in the company, regardless of performance, regardless of position.
I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to say here. You want to give people more money regardless of their actual ability, regardless of what it is that they are doing. Just give them more money because they possess a certain kind of genital. Meritocracy? What's that? People shouldn't be paid according to their ability or their output or their hours worked or their hours of overtime. Nope, we should pay people according to their identity. I just hope that every man who works at your company now has the same thought and simply goes to their HR department and tells you that they are a woman. And of course, you can't deny their identity as a woman because that would make you transphobic.
It gives companies an incentive to really solve the deeper issues that are at heart, that are to do with gender equality and diversity in the workplace.
So you must be absolutely thrilled by the dozens of now transsexual men that you have working at your company. I'm glad that you are fostering an environment where all of these men feel so safe to just tell you about their true identity, and it has nothing at all to do with the pay rise incentive.
But this is unfair on men, isn't it?
Spoken like a true oppressive shitlord.
Why are they getting a raise?
I definitely don't think it's unfair on men. Women have been facing issues for centuries. It's only now that people are starting to talk about how we can make the workplace a much more equal and safe and happy place.
Equal and happy. By paying people more money based on a factor that is beyond their control, in this instance the way they were born, instead of on pesky little details like whether they have actually earned it. So that god-awful mini-segment there was from a short interview on the BBC. Let's now see what Brainlabs themselves have to say about this on their website. Here's how to fix the gender pay gap. Pay women the same as men. Nice to see that you've updated that title from what it originally said, which was simply pay women more. It may sound straightforward, but it's not. You might also think that as a mathematician I'd explain the gender pay gap with complex statistical models, normalizing for differences in men's and women's backgrounds, career paths, and time at work. But normalization is a con. You can justify anything once it's already in place. Of course, why bother actually explaining why this pattern develops? Why bother explaining the fact that men on aggregate choose to work longer hours than women, they choose on aggregate to take more overtime hours, they generally choose to negotiate better deals when it comes to their pay, women tend to prioritize on aggregate greater flexibility, which often involves taking less hours. Fuck all of those variables. That's just you attempting to con people into justifying your sexism, right? Because the choices of individuals resulting in an observable pattern at the end is not good enough for you. Everything has to be because society hates women, right? And this is where things get really fun, because I'm going to compare their current website to their archived website again, because this shows you just how desperate they are to push this through on the basis of gender rather than on any actually mathematically sound or economically sound ground. That's why at Brainlabs we have voted to eliminate the overall gender pay gap by increasing women's pay by an average of 8.6%. We calculated the 8.6% to be our gender pay gap, the difference between the average men's and women's salaries, which we normalized only for experience. At the same time, we reviewed salaries across the whole company to ensure that all employees were being paid fairly based on their role and experience. Now let's back that up to the previous edit of this blog. That's why at Brainlabs we voted to eliminate the overall gender pay gap by increasing women's pay by 8.6%. We calculated this by looking at the differences between men's and women's salaries with no normalization or adjustments. So, in the first instance, you found that there's an 8.6% difference when you normalize only for experience, but previously you made no normalization and still found 8.6%. You've come to the same answer when you're using two different formulas. This coming from someone who claims to be a mathematician. I believe the technical term for what has just happened is busted. You just wanted to give all of the women an 8.6% pay rise. Now I'm going to do a little bit of conjecture here. Could this possibly be that you looked at the financial income of your company, realized that you were making a certain amount of profit, and then thought, we could afford to reduce that amount of profit by X amount. And it just so happens that X amount happens to fit so nicely into giving a certain number of your employees an 8.6% pay rise. And all of those employees just happen to be women, so you can frame this as an issue for feminism. And then no one's going to question it, right? Like I said, a little bit of conjecture, and you could say that it's a bit cynical on my part, and it most certainly is. But pretty objectively, by what they've provided us, the maths does not add up. And this is backed up by some of their own self-defeating quotes from their old website compared to their new. From the new, eliminating the gender pay gap in this way sparked some typical objections. There aren't as many women to choose from in the tech industry. Eliminating the gender pay gap won't solve workplace gender inequality. The previous objections being, there aren't as many women to choose from in the tech industry. There are more men in senior positions, so of course men get paid more overall. A quote that you really had to remove because, oops, it's true for your company as well. You can't solve one inequality by replacing it with another. I can kind of see now why you had to remove those previous quotes of objection from your website. They poke a few too many holes in your overall idea that kind of stop it from holding any water, which you even admit when you say, none of these statements is completely untrue, but all too often they are used as justification for a lack of action in order to maintain the status quo. We believe as a team that by using this methodology, we are turning the problem on its head, tackling the end goal, and then working backwards from there. We're calling it the pay gap tax, a way of penalizing ourselves for failing to redress the imbalance in our company and industry. By committing to repeat this exercise next year, we have a serious incentive as a business to fix the problem. We need to look at all aspects of work, from recruitment to promotion and reward to environment, in order to tackle inequality, which is just code for what you actually mean. This could be as simple as hiring more women into leadership positions or promoting more women, no doubt in your words.
Regardless of performance, regardless of position.
And now for the unconscious icing on the cake. It also goes much deeper than this. It would be wrong to believe that equalizing pay is enough to solve the problem of gender inequality in the workplace. For a start, we need to consider the set of circumstances under which this inequality came to exist. I wholeheartedly agree. You need to start looking at the number of hours that people work, the number of weekend days that people work, the number of overtime hours that people take, the number of sick days that people take, the number of paid holiday days that people take, and various other variables, including level of experience, level of education, number of years that they've worked at your company, and many more. But as you've already admitted, you don't want to look at things like that because according to you, normalization is a con. And understanding these variables is just a way of justifying the status quo sexism that's already in place. So what's your solution instead? Well, overt sexism still occurs, and more must be done to stamp it out. But there is another dangerous tendency at play here. An unconscious bias that is apparent in a number of post hoc justifications which exist all around us. Yep, subconscious level sexism is the most likely explanation for this disparity. It's none of the variables that you have flatly, outright refused to acknowledge. Because if any of those variables should actually explain that disparity, well, that's just a post hoc justification for sexism. Right? Of course it is.